dark jewel of Arcanea. Chapter 2: The Scene of the Crime. The morning light in Arcanea was deceptive, a thin veneer of hope over a city that thrived in the shadows. I made my way to Lila's family shop, the streets still groggy with the night's leftover magic. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of arcane herbs and the distant hum of morning spells. Lila's shop was nestled in a secluded corner of the city, where the ancient magic still murmured softly through the cobblestones. It was a charming little establishment, crafted from warm wood and gleaming glass, now unfortunately scarred by the harshness of a recent intrusion. The door, despite being mended, bore the unmistakable marks of yesterday's violent break-in. Its hinges were slightly askew, and the wood displayed telltale patches where filler had been used to mend the missing sections. As I stepped inside, my boots crunched over the jagged shards of broken glass and the disarray of scattered items, a testament to the chaos that had unfolded. As I entered, the jangle of the bell above the door beating an obnoxious counterpoint to my growing headache, a back office door swung open, revealing Lila standing in the doorway. Lila's expression bore a mixture of relief and worry. "Mr. Moonwhisper, thank you for coming," she greeted, her voice tinged with the strain of recent events. "Please," I corrected with a nod, stepping into the shop. The transition from the bustling, magic-infused streets of Arcanea to the quiet, violated sanctuary of this shop was like stepping from one world into another. "Let's see what we're dealing with here, Lila." She led me through the shop, her hands nervously fidgeting as she spoke, a telltale sign of someone who's seen their world turned upside down. "It happened late last night. I was closing up when I heard the commotion. By the time I got back, the door was already broken, and the amulet was gone." I took in the scene, the destruction not just physical but emotional, evident in Lila's eyes. The place felt like it had been ransacked not just for material gain but to send a message, to shatter the peace. "Did you see anyone, or anything out of the ordinary before it happened?" She shook her head, a lock of her hair falling across her face, adding a touch of vulnerability to her already distressed demeanor. "Nothing, which is what scares me. It's like they knew exactly when to strike. This wasn't just theft, it felt personal. In my line of work, personal thefts are the ones that leave the deepest scars, the kind where the thief steals more than just an object." I nodded, understanding the deeper implications, the undercurrents of revenge or warning beneath this seemingly simple act. "We'll find out who did this, Lila. But I need to know why this amulet? What makes it so special?" "It's been in my family for generations," she explained, her voice lowering as if the walls themselves might listen. "In this city, where magic was as much a part of the architecture as the stone and wood, you never knew who or what might be eavesdropping. It's not just an heirloom, it's said to have magical properties. Protection, some say, or perhaps something more." My mind was already racing, connecting dots in the dark, weaving a narrative from the threads of this chaos. An amulet with magical properties in a city where magic was both currency and danger. This was no ordinary theft. It was a calculated move by someone who knew the value of what they took, or perhaps someone who feared its power. I absorbed this information, piecing together the puzzle in my mind. Arcanea's mysteries were often layered like this, each layer revealing more than the last. Well, we'll start by unraveling those properties then. The magic left behind here tells its own story. If you'll be so kind as to go back to your office so you won't interfere with my castings, I'll begin. She nodded apprehensively, her eyes darting nervously before she quickly scurried back to her office. The soft rustle of her footsteps echoed her unease. I knew non-spell casters like her secretly dreaded magic, even if they masked their fear with a facade of indifference when in the public eye. I pulled out my wand, its smooth, polished wood comforting in my grip, and with a whispered incantation, my voice barely more than a breath, I cast Detect Magic. The dimly lit room erupted into a tapestry of faint, glowing lines and spots that danced across surfaces like spectral fireflies. These were the traces, the residual magic left behind from the break-in. Amidst the overturned furniture and papers strewn like fallen leaves, a familiar signature pulsed with a dark energy I recognized all too well, the unmistakable work of shadow magic. This was not the kind of magic taught in the hallowed halls of the prestigious academies of Arcanea, where sunlight streamed through stained glass windows. No, this was something far more insidious, learned only through shadowy cults and grimoires peddled in the back alleys of streets that existed without names, where whispers carried secrets and danger lingered in every shadow. I walked through the shop, my eyes scanning for anything out of place. The amulet's case was empty, but beside it, something caught my eye, a small, almost invisible rune etched into the wood. I knelt, running a finger over it, a spell to keep prying eyes away, crude but effective. Amateurs, I scoffed dismissively, though internally my mind was already whirring like a well-oiled machine, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle laid before me. The evidence, scattered like breadcrumbs, was slowly aligning in my thoughts, working to form a coherent picture that eluded the others. As I was absorbed in my analysis, the rude chime of the shop's bell announced another presence. I turned to see Ella, her dark hair tied back, her sharp eyes scanning the room with professional curiosity. Ella, known in Arcanea's underbelly for her expertise in magical forgery and her knack for uncovering magical signatures, was an asset I had called upon before. "Elle," she greeted, her voice carrying the weight of shared history. "This looks like a mess you'd dive into headfirst." "Ella, glad you could make it," I said, gesturing to the chaos around us. "Lila's amulet was taken last night. This isn't just theft, there's magic involved that smells of trouble." She walked over, her gaze fixing on the rune I had found. "Shadow magic, huh?" She bent down, her fingers tracing the air above the rune without touching it. "This isn't just any thief, they wanted to hide their trail. But they left a signature. What a curious rune." I stood, looking out into the street where Arcanea was waking up, each citizen carrying their own piece of magic. The city was like a living, breathing spell, and every action had a consequence, whether you could see it or not. As we discussed the implications, a shadow fell across the doorway. I turned to see a member of the city watch, his uniform askew, his eyes scanning the room with more interest than concern. "Detective Moonwhisper," he uttered, his voice oozing with a slick, oily authority that could only be acquired through the tainted channels of corruption. "Officer Venn," I replied, keeping my tone purposefully neutral, with Ella stepping back into the shadows of the shop, her presence known but not acknowledged by the officer. "I heard there was trouble here." His gaze lingered too long on the empty case, his demeanor shifting from law enforcer to something more predatory. "Seems like it," I said, watching him closely. "But I've been hired to retrieve the missing item and will soon have the situation under control." His laugh was short, harsh. "In this city? Control is an illusion, Moonwhisper. You should know that." I didn't know, though I loathed admitting he was right. Arcanea was a city where the law twisted and turned as unpredictably as the magic it harbored. "I'll keep that in mind, officer," I replied, my voice calm but my mind carefully dancing for the correct words to not give him a reason to intrude. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He left, but not before giving the place one last, lingering look. I knew I'd have to watch my back. In Arcanea, the watch was often more dangerous than the criminals. Ella emerged from the shadows, her expression thoughtful. "He's trouble, Elle. Keep an eye on him." I nodded, returning my attention to the crime scene, my fingers tracing the outlines of the magical residue. This spell work. It's complex, layered with misdirection and concealment. This wasn't just about stealing an amulet. It was about hiding something or someone's involvement. Ella agreed, her eyes narrowing at the room's corners. "And they weren't careful enough. We've got a trail to follow." "Looks like you've got more secrets than I thought, Arcanea," I whispered to the empty shop, the city's heartbeat pulsing through the walls. I pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook, jotting down notes. The rune, the type of magic, the officer's interest, all pieces of a puzzle I was determined to solve, with Ella's help. As we left the shop, the morning light had turned harsh, casting long shadows over the city. I knew this case would lead us into those shadows, into the parts of Arcanea where magic and morality were at their murkiest. But I was ready. After all, in the city, you either danced with the darkness or you got swallowed by it. I was no stranger to the dance.